This is a work session, so we appreciate all of you that are following us at home. If you have any questions at the end of this, please send us an email. Okay, we have a proclamation, Teach Children to Save, and then we have some mayor's awards that we won't be doing. Number 3 is public hearing, consideration of plans and specs for the 2019 ADA improvements. Mr. Tisdale?
Actually, this would be
Where's Nick?
the non-responsive person in the back,
He'll
Nick.
run in again all breathless.
But we've set aside $50,000 annually to do some curb ramp improvements throughout town. I don't know the extent of the project that you have, Nick, for curb ramp improvements for this year.
It's running again.
Sorry, Jesse was supposed to be here. So this is a project that's gonna encompass, I just ran up the stairs again.
Okay.
Why do I keep doing this
Can
to
we bring
myself?
it back, or what?
Take a breath, it's fine.
And I go to the gym too, that's sad.
It's kind of becoming your image, breathless Nick.
So this project will entail redoing curb ramps to make them ADA compliant. Get a better picture of me than the side of my face. I think there's could you hit the next slide? He's located some of the areas that we're going to work on. If you remember last fall, we worked on an ADA transition plan to try and tackle curb ramps in the area of schools first, kind of as hot zones, and then work outward from there. So as you can see, we're going to work on Mount Pleasant Street Bridge. There's to the east of that, there's some area that's not very compliant right now. And as a part of this project, because of the federal funds, we have to make them compliant. And then there's some around Barrett Street as well. Would you hit the next slide for me? And so we budget $50,000 annually for this from road use tax. And so what you see is fiscal year 19 and 20. Yeah, you're on my hot list right now. We budget $50,000 annually from road use tax to work on this. This is actually the first planned project. We've had this money allocated for numerous years and really haven't done a whole lot as far as a planned project. So as you can see, Jesse's estimate is $74,450 to do this ADA compliance.
Okay.
We will receive bids May 23rd and then award contract May 6th. Kind of sporadic work just because you're working on crossings, but it's going to be all.
So the Mount Pleasant Bridge connections, those aren't part of the project, so that's gonna be in addition to the project?
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Yeah, we needed to, it was a little bit complicated the way we needed to do it because of the federal funds for the bridge.
Yeah.
To make it ADA compliant, we needed to include that if we were gonna include the extent of the project. Rather than do that, we decided we were gonna do it through different means.
Okay.
So, Jesse's got a different explanation for that.
So Nick, if we've allocated this 50,000, but we have not used it, have we been saving it up?
It's road use tax, so it goes to
Okay.
the road use tax fund balance, and there is, what?
So we transfer $50,000 annually out of the road use tax balance into the separate fund, capital account to be used towards this. And yeah, we've allowed a couple of years worth to build up and then
Okay.
do a little bit larger project than a one-year allocation.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And is that inclusive of engineering costs? Okay.
Right on. Council, are we good?
I'm good.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Mack. Number 4 is a resolution approving bond purchase agreement for general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 219A. And James?
Yeah, so just the next step in going through the borrowing process on the bonds. 4.9 million for the budgeted CIP projects, primarily street projects, and also the runway improvements, and funding for fire truck. And you know what? We just follow what Bob tells us to do on this stuff, but after having approved the pre-levy authorization, having gotten our process in place for doing the borrowing, is this Stephanie is gone, so I don't know that, I think this is
And
the
that's back
approval.
there. Oh, look, they just popped up. Man, I wish the camera could have been facing the back, that'd have been funny.
It's like a puppet show.
Stephanie, I assume, is this before or after the actual, we get bids back? I think that we have the cost back as part of the final approval on this, or do you know? On the bond purchase agreement, is this still on the form of it, or is this, when we do the bond purchase agreement, next week, will it have the final? We should have the final numbers for what the interest rates that we're gonna be having to pay in the final debt service schedule.
Okay.
But we'll get that, I think, Stephanie, if I'm, that sale, those numbers, do we get those yet this week, or is that something that we'll get on Monday, the actual numbers? On Monday.
We good? All right, takes us to number 5, is a resolution amending conditions for Dankworth Park Pool Free Swim Days. Tisdale.
So we had a meeting with South Hill neighborhood, a couple of them, and kind of having an agreement as brought forward here, looking to have a maximum of 6 free swim days each season. They're currently working with South Hill to schedule those at this time. That would be 2 each month in June, July, and August, with 5 being South Hill right now, and the Gentlemen's Club remaining as the longtime sponsor of that as well. And then free swim day sponsors shall arrange and provide a minimum of 2 approved volunteers during the last 2-hour free swims, or the free swim hours shall be limited to 12:30 to 4:30. And they're in agreement with that. They have already identified volunteers to come and help on those hours. And so I think that'll work out and kind of proceed forward, continue to see how it works out, and hopefully we'll have another successful season.
Good.
One of the things that you mentioned, Eric, on the limitation down to the 6, there was a recognition that that 7th, having the final one within a week of the
Yeah.
one before it, that the numbers were just really significantly lower for that final one.
Yeah, we saw the Gentlemen's Club this year, their event was lower numbers. There was one a week prior, and having 3 in 1 month, especially towards the end of the year when we get condensed down, really limits that. And so having 2 each month and space them out around holidays and around opening and close dates seem to work out best.
Okay.
Okay, and so to the Gentlemen's Club, you're good to go. You're good to go. So, good to hear that. Council, we good?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess just to note, the rep that I met with is also on the Gentlemen's Club and South Hill neighborhood, so he
Okay.
kind of represented both, so they're fully aware on both sides.
All right.
Good. Way to handle business, Mr. Tisland. Number 6, guys, a resolution approving the final plat of 5th addition to Sunrise West subdivision. Mr. Tisland?
We went through this, I think this past winter, rezoning and preliminary plating these 5 lots here on the extension of Cambridge Drive for Sunrise West. If you remember, the PUD, we amended to recognize individual lot development instead of one large lot. So this is just final plating these 5 lots north of Messiah on the east side of Cambridge Drive. This would be north of Mason Road. And this was previously approved by the Planning Commission and City Council for the preliminary plat, both 5-0. So just bringing forward the final plat based on the approval of the preliminary plat.
Right on. Let's get her done. Council, we good?
Yep.
Okay. Moving right along brings us to number 7, resolution approving the final plat of 2nd edition to Everman's subdivision. Mr. Tisland, final plat as well.
This is a 1-lot subdivision located north of Burlington in the 2-mile growth area that we have subdivision review. This is located north of Tamer Road. Just a 1-lot subdivision, kind of on that, you can see here in yellow, this bend where Tama goes north and then goes back towards the river and continues north, but no infrastructure, just 1 lot. Again, the county would have to approve as well, but no issues on our end.
Okay.
Council, we good?
Good.
Okay. That takes us to our proposed consent agenda. Number 1 is a resolution approving agreement with IDALS, accepting funding for a water quality initiative project on the Fifth and Valley parking lot. Nick McGregor.
So this resolution will approve an amendment to an agreement with the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship. We previously had a grant for $75,000 with cost share to do the green alley by the Tama building. Due to what happened, we decided to try and see if we could get that amended. At the same time, we were looking at doing a parking lot. So what's in front of you is changing the dollar figures. Permeable pavement is a fairly expensive process to go through. And what we're trying to do here is do a parking lot with bioretention. So kind of a depressed area with plant life in there that'll help filter and hold stormwater. As you can see, the overall budget for that project is $619,000, and the match is a 1-to-1 match of $51,959. So we have to match that. It was easier to do that with the green alley because we didn't have any money up ourselves. We were using the Tama building contribution as the match. In this case, we actually have to use water quality. You can't use the parking lot as the match. You have to use the water quality initiative costs to do that. So that's the reason for the reduction. I can answer any other questions on that though.
Council.
So what are we actually gonna be doing?
It'll be a parking lot with intakes or areas where rainwater can go into and be held. Bioretention with, is Jesse still here? He can answer this. I'm putting him to work.
So what a bioretention area is it is basically curb cuts into the parking lot near where you rest your tire up against, would flow water into a depressed area, and in that area it's roughly 3 to 4 feet of soil mixed with sand and mulch, which basically filters the runoff from the parking lot. Under that, there's an under drain that captures the water, but it basically uses everything as a big sand filter, and then you'll have trees and shrubs and plants and that type of thing planted in this area, and it's kind of complicated, but basically the chemical processes in that mixture of sand and soil will clean that water and keep the soil clean.
Okay.
So it's kind of a green infrastructure type of project.
Okay.
We good?
So, well, okay, that is the current Fifth and Valley Street parking facility?
Correct.
Okay, all right, just wanted to make sure, because we were also discussing about a potential one, and I want to make sure which one we're talking about.
Oh, it is for the potential.
It is for the potential.
It is for the
But
potential.
we don't have the agreement worked out on that.
So where we stand on, well, first, this parking lot that you're looking to do, about 100 stalls?
Yes.
And the costs that you have on there, 570,000, is that inclusive of engineering fees?
It was, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That land, we've talked with BNSF, trying to get some arrangement on, whether it be renting or purchasing. They have expressed a willingness to consider us having an outright purchase of that. They offered that to us, 75,000-ish?
Yeah.
Plus 2,000 for, processing fee that they charge. They'd done an evaluation on it, that was their opinion of value on it. We had a opinion of value that was not for us specifically, but had been done on that for someone else, that put the value somewhere between 50 and 80,000. Fairly widespread, but there aren't a lot of comparables for lots like that with the, so we had countered off of their price at 50, which, that was within the range.
Sure.
I was cool with 50.
They've tentatively said they're willing to sell for 62.5 plus the 2,000 processing fee, but we have not received anything back yet.
Okay, so we're no
to
longer
even-
talking about a land
We're
swap.
talking about an outright purchase.
Okay,
And that is somewhat reflective of looking at where that other plan was and the potential usage of that site.
Okay.
Being able to maintain that for our purposes instead of, doing the land swap.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh, but that isn't up for you to be able to look at, but it
Right.
is something that you're gonna need if you're gonna make that project happen.
Right.
I just can't bring it forward, I'd like to have that as a discussion item, but until I get some paperwork from them outside of an email offer, I don't have an awful lot of, what to say is their final, the final spot. But be
Okay.
thinking of that as we move forward, that's kinda where they're at for, purchase price, and there is a market justification for that value, but it's something that you're gonna have to be, talking with people that you come in contact with about what the overall situation is with it.
What was it, what was the amount?
62.5.
62.5
Will we
plus
counter again, or are we gonna go with that?
that's, you know, I know they had a market, they had an opinion of value that at that 75. Our opinion of value said that their original offer was within the range. They split the difference when they did that 62.5, and I feel that was a good faith split. And we're the ones that have the desire for the land, not them.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
I thought that it was, if we can get an actual agreement with them, I feel pretty good.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely progress. I didn't know how much we could banter back and forth, but we don't wanna get them mad.
Well, yeah, we've been bantering back and forth for a year and a
years.
half on
Yeah.
this.
Well, I like that better than the land swap, that's for sure.
You guys feeling groovy?
Yep.
We are feeling groovy.
Let's move to number 2 then. It's a resolution approving the purchase of property, pin number 16-07-126-011, for extension of Sequoia Drive in association with the Aspen and Dill Reconstruction Project. You might as well hang out.
Yeah, I'm gonna hang out. So, this is for the purchase of a little bit of land, just south of Aspen Drive, or Aspen Avenue, I guess it is there. Basically, when we gave our presentation on the Aspen and Dill Reconstruction Project, we were gonna extend Sequoia to meet up with Aspen, and this is the piece of property that allows us to do that. It's in the top 60 foot of a piece of property that's currently owned by the Catholic Church, so.
You guys have questions on that? Okay, let's keep it moving. Number 3 is a resolution, thank you, sir. Number 3 is a resolution approving amended 28E agreement between the City of Burlington and the Quad Township Fire and Ambulance Association. Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Pretty much.
I do wanna mention back on the parking lot, the majority of that, we're looking at the majority of the cost being covered by what's left from the Manor project site sale.
That's what I thought you said before.
How much of that do we have sitting?
500,000. The land purchase would have to be out of the general fund, which we can accommodate.
Good. All right, so this is our new agreement with the Quad Townships. It's gonna combine our ambulance and fire protection into one contract instead of them contracting for ambulance through CTAA and fire with a separate contract. Just puts it all into one. Couple of reasons we did that. One is because they asked if they could just do that instead of having 2 different contracts and several different meetings to go to every year. The other was when we went to the per capita and they looked out at this $7 per capita, and 3 years from now, they were worried that they wouldn't have enough money with their levy to cover the $7. It's gonna be close to, they don't really know what that levy will bring in 3 years from now, so. We know what it's gonna bring in this next year, and that's included in my memo to you. The way the contract has read for fire protection, they would give us 80% of that levy, and they tax the maximum levy, which is .6075. So that brings in, this next year, that's gonna bring the Quad Townships, I wrote it down in here somewhere, it's 166,000 and some change. And so of that, they're gonna give us 80% for fire protection, and then they use that 20% to pay their CTAA bill. That's how they've always done it in the past. So they were worried at the $7 and might not quite make it. So I did the math there in that second paragraph. You can see for the first year of the new contract, the City of Burlington actually comes out ahead by them combining their agreements. If they would've just stuck with what was there, that they would've paid the city of Burlington $160,525. With the new agreement, which is just a flat 98%, I should've mentioned that. They just give us 98% of the levy. They hold back 2% for administrative costs. So under the new contract, they're gonna pay us $162,729. The good thing is, well, it's good or bad, how you look at it. Good for the city of Burlington, you know, as property valuations go up in the Quad Township, that 98%, that amount grows. So that's gonna grow. I think maybe some with the new assessments that we just had, plus just every year, since we've been doing it, I don't know what the growth rate has been, but it's been pretty decent every year. I think the first year we were around 120,000 or 110 or something, so it does grow. I'm guessing in 3 years from now, it'll be enough that the $7 per capita, we're gonna end up on the better side of that, where we'll actually get a better return than we would have got with 2 separate contracts. So I guess I'll just point out, they are paying the maximum allowed by state code. And in the contract, that's some other language in there, is that if the state would ever change that maximum amount, then they have to agree to move to the maximum amount and then still pay us 98% of that. So that's, I don't know that that's ever gonna happen. I know a lot of entities are urging at the state level to increase that 60 cents. It's been the same since the 70s. That's been the maximum levy amount.
There are a couple of bills at the legislature that would change it. One of the, actually puts it under the county supervisors and does away with the townships on it, and I don't know what impact that has on.
For EMS, yeah, there's a couple different things floating around. I don't know where they're going. The last paragraph there, I just talk about there's a no opt-out clause for either party until December 29th of 2020. That was the end date of our original 10-year agreement with the Quad Township. So when we first got into it, they basically gave us a bunch of equipment that's now owned by the city of Burlington. A couple of pumper trucks, a tender, a bunch of SCBA's, a bunch of miscellaneous equipment. I think that was considered, you know, payment in kind of just here's all this stuff. So we agreed at the time that we would not move away from them for at least 10 years. So they actually wanted to have a couple of them. That was the only, we had started meeting was last Wednesday. And they're on board, super excited about the whole thing. A couple people expressed concern that in 2 years, the city of Burlington would say, we don't like this agreement no more. So they wanted to have a longer period of neither party can opt out. So, well, I think that was something Patrick thought was important for both sides, that, you know, there may be reasons that either party wants to get out of the agreement in 2 years, but at the end of the meeting, we've all agreed, I don't see that happening. They don't see them wanting to go anywhere else either, so everybody's happy with this new agreement, so.
Our revenue's gone up every year. We were at 103,000 back in FY12, and this last year at 133,000. It's going up maybe 4% on average a year.
Right on. Any questions for Chief? Thanks, Chief.
All right, sorry I didn't get this to you earlier, but we just voted on it Wednesday night, so. If somebody has a noon, and this thing about noon on Thursdays, if I don't get it in, she hasn't put it in the packet, so. Kathleen.
That's not new.
Noon on Thursday, right?
It's not new, though.
Oh, it's not new. No, it's not new. It's not new. So, ruined my excuse.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. We've got some hearings set for April 15th. I'm just going to roll through them, and if you have anything to add at the end, please do. Number A.
Number A?
It's a number today. So, okay. This is like the third time done that. Letter A is consideration. Are you eyeballing me?
Yes.
Major, could you come here and give her a ticket for reckless eyeball? Letter A is consideration of an application for housing sustainability grant from the Iowa Economic Development Authority Community Development Block Grant Program. Letter B
Number B.
is consideration of plans and specifications for the 2019 Recplex Road Extension Project. Letter C is consideration of the plans and specifications for the 2019 Dankworth Park Pool Improvement Project. And number D is consideration of an ordinance amending various sections of Chapter 34 Human Rights Commission. 5 is a public hearing previously scheduled by city council, consideration of transit grant application for April 15th. Anybody have anything to add to that before we move forward? Okay. Which brings us to discussion items. Number 1, the treasurer's report. Annette, class of 87.
So in the packet is February's treasurer's report. There's nothing unusual, there's just a couple things that I'd point out. It's like, we just got our December hotel motel payment in March. So there's like a deficit balance in the parks improvement that will go away. The other things that I'd say is solid waste management, the encumbrance, that very large encumbrance, we had an annual PO that was entered that has not had anything put against it, so we got rid of it, so that will be much smaller on the next one, so it doesn't look like we have all this money that we're gonna spend.
Yeah, you've already spent it, it just
Yeah,
hasn't
it
been
just,
reduced.
we're spending it every month. It's a monthly bill that we pay. The other things that I would just point out, there's another, large purchase or encumbrance in our miscellaneous capital projects, and that's actually for the fire truck that's for next year, so we've closed that purchase order out also. They had put it in to order the truck, but it's not really gonna happen until next year. So those are the big things that I can point out to you. Other than that, is there anything that you guys have any questions about?
Bless you. Now, I got a question for you. You feeling good?
Yes.
Okay. I feel good too. Council? All right.
I'm good.
All right.
A lot of the revenues do show under, or right around 50%, especially in the general fund. Expenditures are what you would think of when you're 2/3 through the year. We're just a little bit under 2/3 of the way through our budgeted expenditures. But a lot of our revenues, and especially like in the general fund, we receive bulk in 2 different pieces.
Correct.
So they don't come in on a monthly basis and it doesn't prorate out. We
It's-
are pretty much on track for
Right. It's the
what
same.
we would typically be this time of year.
Right, it's the same with expenditures like our insurance. We pay it all at one time. I mean, on here, looks like we budget it for every month, but we pay it all at once. So it just looks odd percentage-wise, but,
You guys good?
thanks.
Thank you, Annette, class of 87. We appreciate you. Bring us to discussion number 2, FEMA firm map. Double B, come on down. Don't look so happy to be here.
I always find the council meetings entertaining, Mayor, and I appreciate your jovial attitude. We have a proposal before you and at the request.
Yeah, maybe just for context, and I wasn't here the night that this came forward, but Tim Scott was here, as he went to do some redevelopment with one of his buildings. One of the issues he came up is that a corner of the facility is in the floodplain. And as he went through the process of trying to get it out, he realized that the only way to get that addressed is through a revision of the map. That process could be asked to be done on an individual basis. It'd be fairly expensive to ask one property owner to do a full-scale revision of a waterway. So the request that he had brought forward to the council was, would you consider having this type of study done to see what impact could potentially be done on that floodplain if we had a more detailed mapping done in that area. With that in mind, we asked Klingner and Associates to tell us what it would take to get that accomplished.
Yeah. So maybe even a little more background on that is when FEMA produces the firms, or the D firms, digital flood insurance rate maps, they don't necessarily study down to the detail every little inch of watershed. And so that's the case we have in downtown Burlington. And so there are some assumptions that are made at a very high level. There's no real ground truthing, and so they produce what they consider a good risk map to inform people that they are potentially at risk of flooding. So that's their intention with those maps. What this proposal would do, and at the request of city manager, is to look at doing that study for the particular area that impacts the urban area of downtown Burlington. We counted approximately 70 homes and or businesses that would be impacted by that. I'm fairly certain this isn't the first type of problem like this. I've been approached by other business owners in the vicinity that wanted to get their place out of the floodplain, and we kind of gave them some stuff, but nobody wants to spend that kind of money on their own property. Part of the cost of doing this is running some models, and this is sort of a complex watershed in that we have the watershed coming in, but we have some of it submerged in the old stone arch sewer, and then some could run over Jefferson Street through the downtown. We've experienced that at least twice that I recall since 2004 when I moved here, where the water not only couldn't get all the way in the sewer, but also flowed on the surface, and so that was impactful. So our proposal is to prepare the models and collect the data and information from Public Works and so forth to actually identify, according to FEMA standards, what that study would entail, what the floodplain area would be, and establish the base flood elevation. Now, there is a significant, what I would consider a significant permitting fee just for a letter of map revision. It's a LOMR, if you've heard of that, it's about $8,000.
That's a lot of money.
It is, and that's so their engineers can review what we've done and make sure we did it right. We have experience with this in a number of communities and non-urban areas alike, and so we feel pretty comfortable that this is we feel like this is what it's gonna take to get it done. And at the end of the day, those people will be able to say, yeah, I'm really truly in or I'm not in the floodplain.
Eric, can you put up the map that's on, I don't know if you can easily or not, on page 50 of the packet?
Might be easier to pull
So-
up the GIS here.
Okay.
Does the 39,000 include the LOMA fee?
No, the LOMR fee is in addition to the 39, yeah. That would be paid, the 8,000 would be paid to FEMA once that LOMR application is made.
If you go through this agreement, a lot of, you're relying a lot on what information we have on hand, and depending on what we have that's needed or don't have that's needed, there's some language in here that discusses some potential additional hourly costs that may be on top of this.
It could, I can't say how much, if any, that would be, but you have pretty good sewer records, we have pretty good information that we can work with, and we have the LiDAR, which the state provides, and I think, I feel like we're pretty comfortable with the area with the dollars we're talking about.
So for the map, one of the things I just wanna note as you look through here, and one of the things that you have to be cognizant of as you go through this process, Brian talks about the number of property owners that are impacted. You go through and do more detailed mapping, you may have properties pulled into the floodplain that under this current map are not, while taking others out. So you can end up with winners and losers in this process. I think you need to understand that that's a potential consequence
That's right.
of going through this.
And so, okay, so after this study and they say, wow, you guys are in a floodplain, so.
What are the consequences of being in a floodplain when you go to do any project, or if you have an existing facility?
You have to have flood insurance, which is extremely expensive.
Right, your first floor elevation has to be 1 foot above that floodplain. Yeah, your insurance goes up if you find out you're in. If you're out, it goes down.
Hopefully yours was, as they rebuilt their new store, they looked at, that property was impacted by this, and one of the things they did was, if you think about the front, when you go in the front door, you're going up a ways, they made sure that they raised the base level of the facility to be outside of that floodplain. So depending on where a property sits with that, you may, to do a redevelopment, it may cause you to have to do things such as that in order to be able to do a project.
But isn't that the point right now? No one really knows what it is?
Right, this would employ the science and the engineering to establish.
Well, right now, you're reliant on what their maps say.
Right.
And that's,
And this is a legal document, so essentially it's based on what I said, it's their best guess without studying it. what we're proposing is to provide the study to say, yeah, this is or it isn't.
So so again, you may have properties that benefit from this process, but you may have some that
Right.
do not benefit, and
And we
you have
could
to
have
understand.
more that would not benefit than what we had.
So you may go through that process and you may have several properties that are actually harmed by doing a revision of that. And I guess at that point, you could have a discussion, if you go through this process and do this study, do you actually submit it?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything requiring us to submit it.
But,
Well, I'm not
but
gonna-
you're
I'm not
also,
gonna do a
if,
study and not-
so
I'm not gonna pay
Well,
for
but
it.
we may, if we went
you-
with this.
if you wanna make a
we'd have to
firm
do-
decision up front, it certainly takes out worrying
Yep.
about any lobbying effort
Correct.
from people who may be impacted by it, by if you say, we're spending this money, we're just
Yeah, I'm not-
following through and doing it.
If we're not gonna submit it, if that's even a possibility, I would say, let's save the 50 grand.
Well, the only thing is, if you look at that, one of your brownfield studies is, a couple of them are right in those areas. And so if we're ever going to get a developer to come in, I'm just putting it out there. You know, that's gonna be a definite cost if we don't,
Does it make sense to wait till we get to that point to do it?
I don't know. Well,
I mean, I don't know that
the one,
there's any true benefit right
I
this
think the
minute,
reason
but.
Tim brought it up is because the west end of Jefferson has not had the same development as the other end.
Right,
And that's where he was coming from. And of course, you also have, it looks like maybe a little bit of valley there. Wish we had a better map here on our thing, but, I think that's why he brought it up, is because his determination is this one of the reasons why we haven't seen the development on the west end of Jefferson.
I think he had a specific project that he was looking
And
to
he
do.
has his
He did.
specific, yes.
I think there's gonna be more losers on this when it's all said and done. That's just
I
my feeling.
I disagree.
That
I
makes me
mean,
nervous.
here's the thing is, I've got a lot of clients that have gone through, FEMA rezoning and have done elevation certificates, and typically, it's more, narrow than it is before this is done. Typically, you have more people that fall out of it than you do that would go in it.
I mean, they're not in downtown Burlington, though.
No, but I mean, they're in other areas that have gone through this rezoning, and, most of the time, you have more property fall.
Young
out.
man standing, young man standing.
This is Will Klingner. He'll address what we've seen in our previous studies.
So I helped put this proposal together, and I've done a lot of these Lomar studies in the past, more than a dozen. I've never actually seen the floodplain get significantly larger in any respect. So typically what we see is the floodplain will shrink or it'll migrate, so areas that weren't impacted are now impacted. But these initial maps are really, really conservative. Someone from FEMA will take a look at a topographic map, take the most conservative topographic line they can find, and they'll trace it and say that's the floodplain. When we do these detailed studies, it typically shrinks down, or at least will migrate. And the good thing is that when you do these maps, now it's the actual flood risk. This is where the actual flood risk is. It's not some guess from somebody over at FEMA, sitting at a desk and drawing a line. It's these people are at risk and these other people aren't. So it's good to kind of know.
Yeah, if you state it like that, it actually, I just lost my train of thought there.
Well, yeah,
It'll come back.
It gives you
An accurate assessment,
Right.
so
And then
we
make a
can
good decision.
accurately protect ourselves if we are in risk of flooding.
exactly.
So
These
that's
folks
what
are
I meant to
actually
say.
at risk, while these folks aren't. So
Have the same trouble
the
you
correct people are buying flood insurance rather than the people that maybe
But,
shouldn't.
Yeah,
but
just guessing.
But you're still potentially having some that migrates who is impacted. So you're gonna have
That weren't in
potentially
it,
some,
that will be,
some
yeah.
losers from it. And I don't know what the variation is. I've seen some stuff with FEMA where you've gone from being kind of they have a 10-foot, within 10-foot estimate of height to now you're getting within 2 foot as they go from the firms to the D-firms.
What structures?
And yours is getting more accurate than that.
Yeah, we'll be more accurate to that. The BFE is usually within a foot, and if someone is shown in the floodplain, they can always it gives the option of a letter of map amendment. So an individual property owner can compare their property to this newly developed base flood elevation. So even if the map shows them in, but they have a dispute with that, it gives them a plan of recourse to be able to say, hey, I disagree with the map. I think my lowest floor elevation is actually higher than base flood elevation. Now they have an ability to go to FEMA and prove that. When you have an approximation map, you don't have that, that ability, because there's no elevations associated with that map whatsoever. it's just a line.
Well, the other thing, I guess, if a property did migrate into it, at least they would know, because right now, they might not be sitting with flood insurance, and they should have it.
They should have it, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why this is a community effort rather than a landowner by landowner by landowner effort. This is a good thing for a community to do, to establish it and clear away the fuzzy and vagueness of it.
This is not a planned item from the city's perspective, so we don't have funds that are budgeted for this. If you were to say you wanted to move forward with this and how to pay for it, the best recommendation I could make is talking about the economic development funds. In fact, we brought it, with the Economic Development Committee, we brought it up that this is a potential project that might come to them asking for funds. And it would be similar to other things that we've funded out of there. The most specific relevant example would be the quiet zone through the downtown was funded with that. Making it, in the justification there, you're looking at the ability to more readily redevelop property.
I'm in.
I'm in-ish, but I still, I'm cautious on this, and I would like to give it a week or two to hear back from some businesses that may or may not be affected by that, and to see if there's the real desire outside of one project. But this isn't a life or a death deal with me, so I'll roll with you guys with what you want to do.
I'm in for doing it. I think it's necessary and it's long overdue.
That's one.
I already said yes.
That's two. Girls, ladies,
From a business standpoint, I always hate to have to pay more for insurance, but on the plus side, if I knew I was in a floodplain and I could actually protect my business from totally being destroyed and not have that coverage, I think it's a good thing. So I think I am 3/4 in. Does that help you out?
My question is you've said you've never expanded the floodplain area. I guess with more recent years, as the flooding seems to be getting worse and worse kind of thing, how likely do you think that could be that it would grow?
Well, let me address that. So the numbers that we use are gonna be based on statistical storms that are produced and widely available in engineering manuals and such. And so those get revised from time to time, but the FEMA maps don't get revised even that often. So I think you could say, okay, well, it's rained a lot more in the last 5 years. That has nothing to do with how this gets developed. It has to do with exactly the statistical relevance of the storm, 100-year event, 24-hour storm, whether, what's published climatological data on that. So what we do here isn't going to prevent somebody from being flooded. It's
Right.
just telling what's the most accurate
likelihood.
version, yes. So, does that answer your question?
It does, but I understand, my point is saying that if it does get bigger, then that more people are gonna be required to,
To clarify, I've never seen it unilaterally get bigger.
Right.
Across the whole area. Some areas might get bigger, some probably will shrink and so on and
Yeah.
so forth, so.
fluctuates, but I was generally thinking that it could grow.
One other thing that I've noticed that isn't taken into consideration is construction projects that occur within that zone area. While they can have an effect on the topographical map, it's not necessarily adjusted in the flood map accordingly. So that's where I think we've done a lot of work down there in the past. It hasn't been touched. This is something that I think will help more people and it'll hurt.
So,
All right,
If you want, if you have 3 of you or more that say this is worth taking a look at and moving forward, we can have that go through the channel going to the Economic Development Committee for them to review and give their thoughts and input onto whether they recommend using funds for it, and then have it come back as an
Yeah,
action
that's-
item
that's-
here.
like that.
That's where the funds should come from, so yes, that would be great.
Yep.
You guys agree with that?
sounds good.
And as more communities north of us put in permeable pavement and stuff, it actually could change in our favor. So things can change over time.
I have no clue what she just said, but, yeah.
As more water is absorbed, that's where you have more green infrastructure.
Most of that's gonna be Mississippi River. This is a defined watershed within Burlington.
Oh, okay, yeah, we're
Put
talking
in
about that
where
other
it
little
will
entity.
pay them back.
I was trying to put a positive spin on it for Shane.
Thanks, Peanut Butter, I appreciate you. Okay.
Thank you.
Looks like we'll be moving forward. Thanks for coming down. Double B, always good to see you, my friend. Okay, we're good to go?
Yep.
Brings us to, my good buddy Mike. Homes for Iowa. Mr. Norris, Chuck's little brother.
I heard this in the morning.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about Homes for Iowa. I think we've got a presentation. While it's being brought up, I'll just give you a little background. I think last time I was here, I talked a little bit about we were working on this concept, and since that time, it's accelerated quite a bit. But to go way back to how this started, almost 5 years ago, regional planning staff approached Iowa Prison Industries, and we asked them if they could build houses for us at the new Iowa State Penitentiary in Fort Madison. If you remember at that time, the penitentiary was nearing completion, and for various reasons, the logistics did not work, how the
Door
fence
wasn't
was
wide
built.
enough.
What's that?
Door wasn't wide enough.
That was one of the main reasons. But the other reason was IPI is all about jobs and training and providing another benefit for what they're doing. And it's a longer term stay at ISP than at other institutions. So as we kept talking about this, IPI expanded the scope and the scale and really explored what are the workforce implications of this. How can they have a positive effect on offenders in the correctional system? And it became clear that Newton Correctional Facility was the perfect place to do something like this because it's a medium-term stay facility. It's centrally located. They've got a lot of room to build homes. And so what initially became a question just for Southeast Iowa became a question for the state. How do we scale this up? What other ideas are out there? And then we discovered South Dakota has done this since the mid-late 1990s. They've built over 2,200 homes since that time. And they have gradually changed their offerings, but the core principles of what they've done remain, and those are building affordable homes for people in South Dakota. Obviously, there's a cap on that. They're not, only supplying homes. There's a lot of other things going on. They're also training future skilled trade workers in South Dakota. They've got standing orders from electrical contractors, from different contractors around the state for graduates of their program.
Wow.
And then the last thing is the correction system itself. They're reducing recidivism by training the offenders so that they have skills when they get out. And right now in Iowa, it costs around $60,000 a year to incarcerate someone. And there's a further cost and economic impact, direct, induced, and otherwise for a crime committed in your community. So it touches a lot of areas, and so the Iowa Association of Councils of Governments, I brought this project to them, and we're going to be involved as the first point of contact for the program. And there's 17 councils of governments in Iowa. Regional planning is one. All of us are recognized in state code as to the areas we serve, and there are certain things that we're supposed to do area plans, coordinate governmental things, and we're involved in a lot of things. We're kind of at a crossroads of community development for a lot of our members. So what do? We write and administer a lot of grants. We run loan programs. We have a long history with housing programs, both new construction, single-family, multifamily, down payment, rehabilitation. We've done a lot of different things. We work with a lot of different people, private, public, real estate, banking, institutions, have a lot of great relationships in our communities. We We also work with planning and zoning and building codes, and we do a lot of paperwork with this project. That's a good experience to have. So the principles that we're going for in this program are very similar to South Dakota. We want the program to produce a high-quality home that's affordable to median income people across the state. We want to train offenders in high-demand skilled trades, but we also want to strengthen communities and assist the justice system by reducing recidivism, and ultimately create a housing and workforce program that's self-sustaining, that isn't reliant on public appropriations every year.
Right on.
So how does this all work? Well, the very first thing is that an individual, a city, a developer, a nonprofit would reach out to their area COG. And that COG would be essentially the salesperson. They go through a development checklist, ask a lot of questions about where would the house be developed, do you control that site, what about your financing, what's your income, basically get the whole plan. Once we get the whole plan, we give the plan to Iowa Prison Industries, and then they start building the house. So while the house is being built, all the site work is done, the foundation or the crawl space is put in, the utilities are run, and that's all managed at the local level by whoever's responsible for that development, whether it's the home buyer, whether it's a nonprofit or a developer. Now this is the part that trips up a lot of people and is going to be one of the most difficult parts, which is actually moving the homes from the site in Newton to the building site. We're going to truck them in one piece. So it's going to be a 24-foot wide oversized load. Rolling through Burlington. All right. So the houses will be built near the Newton Correctional Facility. IPI owns quite a bit of land. They do some interesting things down there. They actually have community gardens where they supply food pantries in central Iowa with fresh food, which isn't widely known, but a lot of the offenders work in those gardens and do that. So we're gonna occupy about 12 acres, and it's gonna be fenced, and we think we'd have capacity for about 200 homes. That'd be about 100 building sites being turned over twice a year. But obviously that is in the future, and we need to start the program with one house first. So this is a sample of the site layout, and we've modeled this very closely after South Dakota. We actually used GIS mapping to copy the home placement in South Dakota and placed it with the same angles and spacing and things like that. So as you can see up here, we have several buildings and things that are not in place now. Ultimately, we need a warehouse to store materials because when you buy in bulk, you get a better price, and to hold donations that we'll hopefully be getting. There's going to be some fabrication and education shops, a sheet metal shop for the plumbing and heating guys to train, electrical storage, some prefab shops for door and window framing, for example. So a lot of the production interests here.
Do you have that covered yet?
What's that?
Your startup costs to make that happen?
I'd say we're very much closer. Yeah.
Not quite all the way.
More to come.
Okay.
Yeah. This is what South Dakota is building right now for a 3-bedroom home. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath home. And when the home is shipped out, it will be sheetrocked, painted, cabinetry, fixtures. Basically everything will be in place except for the flooring and appliances. So HVAC is in there. So when the home is placed on the site, homeowner or developer puts floor coverings on, and they do appliances, and then there's a little bit of a small repair that's done. And so it's really shipped as almost probably 90-some% turnkey. If you tilt your head, that's the
Governor's house.
elevation. Or, we've thought about building a 3-story townhome version of these, for downtown areas. So this is a photo of the site, And these are built on concrete blocks, and so the building pad essentially is a gravel pad with footings where they put blocking up and then frame the house up from there. Now, when the house is done, a trailer backs in, sets the house down on a special trailer, and then they ship it out. Iowa Prison Industries is also going to be building the cabinets for this. And it's easy to talk about all the housing aspects, but the workforce and the rehabilitation aspect is something that should never be lost in this whole process as we talk about mortgages and financing and redevelopment and infill and all the words. So 2 years ago, I've been to this site 3 times to talk with the South Dakota program, kind of get a feel for how things work and how they do it so we can try to replicate something here. And so the second time we went, we were in a house and just looking all around, kind of getting a feel for it. In that particular house, on that particular day, they were doing trim work, doing the baseboard molding, the door trim, the window trim. And when we walked in, we saw this really well outfitted rolling tool chest. So it kind of opens up and it lays out all the tools. You can lay the trim and saw it and use your block plane to do the miters. And we went up and we just asked one of the guys, hey, how do you like this? How's it going? And this is what he told us. He said, I was always told I was good at nothing. And until this program, I didn't realize that I had a talent. I was actually great at something. So when you hear someone say that, if I wasn't a believer already, I was at that point. So just some bullet points for the program. These are quality stick-built homes. It's 2x6 construction. They're very tightly built. They're tight enough where you need to have a mechanical ventilator with heat recovery to exchange air. If you have an old house like mine, you don't need one of those because air just kind of blows in, different places. We think this will lower recidivism rates depending on the study and the program and different things. We think that people going through this program could lower their recidivism by 30 to 40%. This is a new pipeline of skilled trades workforce. And in the next couple slides, I'll talk about the private-public partnership aspect of this. But the skilled trades is something that should also not be ignored among other things with this program. A couple of interesting examples from South Dakota. One of the biggest drywall contractors in Des Moines, we haven't tracked down this guy yet, but he's a graduate of the South Dakota program. I don't know what his offense was, but he was in prison. He went through this program, he learned how to sheetrock. He moved to Iowa, started a business, and now he has grown that business. He's got tens of employees and apparently very successful. I'd like to talk to that guy so we can get him involved in this.
No doubt.
But as I mentioned before, they've got contractors with standing orders for these guys. So I think the education is possible. I think we can do that here in Iowa as well. So we being the Homes for Iowa partners, and myself included, we developed a 10-year cash pro forma to model what would it take to build 875 homes. And there's no magic number to that. It just sounded good, 875. And that's, by year 10, that's around 165 homes a year. So one of the goals was, as we mentioned at the beginning, was to make this a self-sustaining thing where you don't have to go through a state appropriation process or keep getting grants, to run this thing. So when you're building that many homes, you need over $3 million every 6 months for supplies, to pay offenders, to pay managers. There's a lot of cost for that. And so this is basically what it would take with a whole list of assumptions. Like I said, we haven't built a house yet, so you've got to assume quite a bit of things. But we're looking at $3 million in startup funding and then another $4.75 million in loans. And I'll be the first one to say, because I did most of this work, is that a lot of these assumptions can change these needs, rapidly. For instance, how quickly we can move the homes. Can we find a private contractor that can move the homes? Can we help them scale up to reduce that cost? you know, what's it cost to move a house? The latest market data we have is that 15,000 gets you in the door, and after 5 miles, it's $100 a mile after that. And that's probably a friend price. So imagine moving it 100 miles, you can do the math.
It used to be 10,000 to lift, 10,000 to set, and you could figure 10,000 for transportation.
So,
But that's a long time ago, and this is different. I don't know what it works out with when you have a home that's set up on a you're not having to lift it off of a platform, so I'm wondering about that initial cost.
so what we're focusing on right now is starting up. The nonprofit that we started to run this program met a couple weeks ago. We're gonna work with Iowa Prison Industries to build 4 homes this year. And we wanna focus on a fewer number so that when there are mistakes, which there will be, you know, we don't have, we're not promising the world to people. We can work on 4, move forward, tell the stories of 4 homes. And we're gonna learn a lot along the way. So these numbers will likely change, but this is just, you know, I don't think these are too far off, but this is kind of what it takes to do, you know, what we're talking about. So there's a lot happening recently. This Homes for Iowa nonprofit has been started. This is a very different way than what South Dakota does. Basically, the Housing Finance Authority in South Dakota just bankrolled their entire program. And they could do that because that's something that they, as a state, wanted to focus on. Iowa has a lot more programs and different things it's doing, and I think Iowa Finance Authority will be a partner, but nobody's lining up to bankroll this, so we're kind of going from the ground up. But we have a board established, and we have a diverse group of people on the board, from home building, building trades, banking, real estate, business. We've got a lot of good people on there. We're applying for the 501c3. We're getting that ready to submit to the IRS. And what the nonprofit's gonna do, they're gonna manage, all the money's gonna flow through the nonprofit. So they're gonna make sure that this is sustainable, that they're not spending money they don't have, and to make the whole thing work. And they're gonna set the rules. Who can buy a home, how much it's gonna cost, what kind of home is gonna be built. And IPI is gonna contract with the nonprofit to do all of the building and the staffing and things like that. Also recently, in the governor's condition of the state address, she announced her support for the creation of this program. And shortly after that, the Department of Corrections identified about $1 million they could use to build a fence for the site. And we talked about the 4 pilot homes in 2019, and then Iowa Prison Industries is, as they learn how to manage this program, we already went once this year to bring legislators there to kind of do some final things as we, you know, tried to spread the word about this program. You know, they're going up again. They're fully committed to this. And a couple weeks ago, we met with Iowa Finance Authority about what their ability was to help us start the program. Had a great meeting. They gave us some information, and we're going to be presenting to their board in May and June, and hopefully have a package to announce. So what's next? Kind of what we're doing tonight, just talking about the program, asking for support of the program. So in the future, we'd love a letter of support from the city of Burlington if you saw your way fit to support a program like this. And we want to illustrate the support for a couple reasons. Number one, this isn't a fully formed idea. We're going to be learning a lot, but we want to hear about, do people want houses like this in their town? We want people to start thinking ahead about how maybe we can get a few houses here. And the purpose isn't to change the housing market, it's to develop homes where it's really hard to develop a home. For instance, a lot of our neighborhoods in southeast Iowa, not even here in Burlington, it's hard to build a new house in a neighborhood and finance that because there's not a lot of comps around for that. So you want to build a $200,000 house when a lot of the homes around it are worth $100,000, 120, 80, you know, it varies. So this can help smooth those costs and kind of set an anchor point, and hopefully encourage other investment. So we're gonna be seeking a lot of money for this, asking for money, private donations, grants, corporate contributions, corporate foundations. Probably for the first few homes, we're gonna be asking for money up front from people that want the homes, just because of cash flow and startup, but hopefully more to come on that. And thank you for your time, and really like to hear any thoughts or questions or ideas.
You know I love this too. Well, maybe you don't, but I love this. I'll just leave it there. I think it's phenomenal, or I'll start rambling, but I just, there's a big problem with recidivism, big time, you know, everywhere. And I can't speak for everywhere, I can only speak for my community. And I would love to see something like that happening right here in Burlington, and possibly, you know, I would love to see a program like that right down the road. You know what I'm saying? That would be nice. But you gotta crawl before you walk. I'm ready to crawl. I like it. I'm glad you came down with this.
Thanks.
I'm all for a letter of support. Quite honestly, the transport thing, I could envision a time where IPI would do training on that end of it too. So I think a letter of support is a no-brainer.
You can find someone to do the transport for you.
I'll call you for that number, Jim.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mike?
No questions. It just seems like a great program. I mean, why not teach those who don't have the skills that we need all over the country right now as it is? So, thank you.
I had a couple questions.
Yeah.
When this was first proposed, when I was in Des Moines, I thought it was targeted more as a low income, and you said moderate income. But 60,000, is that just the build price, or is that what they're gonna enter the market at? Cause to me, that's pretty low income for a 2-3 bedroom home.
So what we've modeled in that plan I talked about was a $60,000 price delivered. Now, the cost of the lot, of the foundation or crawl space, and the concrete work, maybe adding a garage, that would all be on top of that 60,000.
So you're gonna have another probably 30 to 50, depending on
What you
where it's
wanna
located
do.
and what else you were to add.
Okay.
And it depends who's developing this. This would be something Habitat for Humanity chapters, could do. This could be something the Regional Housing Trust Fund could do. And so it also depends who's developing it, what kind of,
So
package they want to put together.
do you envision yourself being a supplier for a developer? If somebody comes and says, hey, I wanna buy 10 acres of land and put 100 houses on them, and just start supplying houses?
I think that, when you look at the state, 99 counties, South Dakota's, they've got less than a third of our population, and they're doing about 120 to 150 a year. 150 is a big year for them. So what's possible in Iowa? Let's say it's 200, just because we're talking. That's 2 per county if you want to look at it that way. So I've received calls from places like Ames, Fort Dodge, at our Southeast Iowa days, had some people come up, hey, can we have 10, can we do 20? I think just based on those messages, we're gonna have a lot more demand than what we'll have supply for. And the other thing we're really sensitive about is not really competing with the private sector, but complementing the private sector. We look at these houses as ones that really aren't being built commonly right now. I mean, there's just not a lot of builders that.
And that's why I don't think it's gonna be competing with the private sector. I think it's actually filling a void that
Yeah.
isn't being filled today.
Yeah.
In large part because the price point isn't there,
Yeah.
and that's because, your labor is gonna be significantly less than it would be in the private market, right?
Absolutely. And Matt, so, do I envision 100 unit development filled with these homes? No. Do I envision 100 unit subdivision filled with like 5 or 10 of these? Yeah, I could see that.
I think think it's a great idea if we were to use it for infill. I question whether it would really change the comps of a neighborhood. I mean, you're putting a 90,000 tie-in, 110,000. I don't think I'd want to go in that neighborhood and build a $200,000 home. I don't think that's going to change the comps that much. But
Well,
if it was a really repressed area, it might, maybe.
and Linda, I think when you look at an infill lot, we're probably gonna be working with the city maybe on some lots that they've acquired through 657. We have some we have a friend up in Sioux Falls, the COG up there. You know, their average development costs are $170,000 for a governor's house. So the governor's house costs like 56 in South Dakota, something like that. So the house delivered is 56, but it's a pretty hot real estate market up there. So the lots are expensive, you know, contractors are expensive, everything scales up. But depending on how you develop it, where it is, and who does it, you know, those costs could vary quite a bit.
Sure. And you
This-
don't see this competing with the trades, the small schools, the community colleges for
No.
labor? Okay.
Actually, I've talked with the community
I know we need
college.
more labor, so,
I mean, this would be a great class in developing a home, budgeting, bidding, planning, where you don't actually have to do all of the framing, the carpentry, the finish. This can be more of a, you know, 1 semester or 2 semester class about land development maybe.
okay. So the inmates would take the classes and earn college credit? No.
Well, let's talk about the offenders here.
Okay.
So the offenders would have to go through an application process, and part of the benefit of the program isn't even going through the program, it's behaving well enough to get a chance to get into the program. So it kind of goes even back further from the actual training. And it's a very highly, you know, sought after thing. Already in Newton, you know, they've had a lot of, you know, just requests like, hey, I've heard about this, like, how do I get in it, or what do I have to do? So it's gonna be an application process, first of all, and then second of all, if they can get into an apprenticeship, they'll do that, but even if it's not a formal apprenticeship training, like if they get credit for the apprenticeship, they'll still go through a very similar, level of training for that trade. And so whether they get college credit or not, it kind of depends on, you know, who they are. There's Pell Grants for that maybe they could do, but the college credit isn't a central focus. The focus is more on the
Developing the
trade
skills.
training. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You guys good?
Mike, you've worked on this for 5 years?
Almost 5.
And
That's it?
this is something that came out of we started these discussions when we had a small group, the Surge group, and you brought this up as what about this idea?
Yeah.
And it's now come on to be a full statewide initiative through him pushing on this. And it's taken quite a bit of time, but this has come from this area. We were looking at this initially when we started talking about this for the whole idea of Surge was to how do we impact some of our more challenged neighborhoods where we haven't seen a lot of development over time. So from the perspective of how do we get some infill lots filled into areas where you've got blocks where you don't have a single house on the block that is worth more than 60 or 70,000 based off of previous sales. And that puts a pretty low price point over what can you put in here that if somebody's gonna spend the money to buy it and put it in place, can they resell it? And if your neighbors are selling houses at 70,000, you can't have a home that's 200 and make it realistic. It's just not sustainable in a neighborhood. This is really, for us, we look at this, or I look at this from the perspective of how do we do this to do some of that, fill in some empty lots, some challenge lots in locations where you don't have an alternative use for it, which is why we've talked about where Eric has gained some lots through the 657A process, either currently or as we move forward where we know we have some places that we're gonna have to do demolition. How do we reuse those places? We've also talked about this for, I mean, one of the initiatives that we talked about up at the State House that was mentioned to us was a pocket neighborhood, building a small, like, 8-unit neighborhood. You, looking at what is being done in some other communities, the costs that are going into it, the amount of money to make a $160,000 new home purchase occur, they're putting $1 million of incentives in to make that work. That's for 8 units. This is a process where you're hoping to see if you can get units built at the same type of price with more, instead of $1 million for 8 units, you're asking for potentially like $8 million for 800 units. There's a different magnitude of scope from just a pure financial basis, let alone what you're doing for building job skills long term. We've had some very few places that would work for an infill development, but I can think of the location over by Fairway that has had a proposal come forward in the past. If you did a small subdivision that had eight units in that area where it didn't have the density that was being talked about, that would allow you to get homes sold in there at a price that you could actually market, you could have a lot of winners from this type of process. That's not something that can occur in the first year of what your program is.
No, this is, just like it took us a few years to really get into this, it's gonna take a few years to really ramp up. Now, I think the demand demand's gonna be there. I think when the homes are placed and people see what's possible and we start telling the stories about how it's really affected someone's life for the better, I think there will be a lot more interest, but, scaling this up is gonna take resources. And it's gonna take, funds to, people need to supervise the process and the offenders. We have to pay the offenders, pay the moving, the materials, and there's capital costs. There's buildings, there's tools on the site. I mean, it's a long list of things, but the other thing is that, when Jim's talking about these areas that are hard to develop in, maybe we don't want to fill that all up with prison homes, or I shouldn't call it Homes for Iowa. Homes for Iowa
Got
homes.
it.
Maybe there's a couple of those. Maybe there's a couple of homes built by SCC, which
Right,
we're working
right.
in partnership with the city on at Amelia and Hageman. Maybe it's a couple of other things. I mean, it's really going to take a blend of things to address a lot of the issues that we're seeing in our neighborhoods. It's not a hey, do TIF and it'll work, or do trades class, it'll work. I mean, it's going to take a few things and inspire people to, come up with their own ideas too.
I like it.
Thank you for your efforts on it.
And Mike, I've got that guy's pen out in my car if you want to wait till after the meeting.
Yeah, I'll be
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, when I see you on Thursday? Did I see you on Thursday?
I don't know. What's Thursday?
This week?
Yeah, it's this week.
Yep, see you there.
Okay. Is that this week? You don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think I
Okay, which brings us to.
did. See? I did know.
Ow! That was assaulted.
Man.
Did you see that, Major?
Actually, I think the whole back row silently applauded.
I did not.
Don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking
All
about.
right, man. Number 4, Alley Power Line West Nicholson.
So
Come on down.
this came up out of some discussions about, you had a request from a property owner who said, why can't we do something about getting property lines undergrounded? The overhead that's making it difficult to do some work along my property.
Yeah.
If we could get it undergrounded, it would help. And so with that in mind, Eric has worked to make contact with Wes. So what do you have for us?
Well, as you know, we've had a lot of outages here since the Tama Building fire, so we're needing to speed up the process of our rebuild downtown here. We want to start with, alleys at a time, phase them in, but we need to work with you guys on your alley rebuilds. obviously, we don't wanna go in and tear up an alley, put our facilities in, and then have you come back in a couple years and tear it up again, when we wanna work together on that, so. I guess that's what we're asking, is the city to start looking at what you wanna do with these alleys. The way it sits right now, we could go in and put new cable in, rebuild the way it sits exactly, but we think there's better looking, better options for you.
So, real quick, I'm sorry, who do you represent?
Alliant.
Okay, all right.
As you look at this, moving forward to do something, alleyways for us, Nick, maybe 50,000 to concrete an alley? That's from Bessie?
After looking at it today, 35-ish.
Let's say 50,000. Given my.
That's how he
maybe a-
rolls,
maybe-
man, that's how he rolls.
Jim's already planning to tear it up and do it again.
I started to go farther with that, and then I decided I better not do that. But if we do, and I don't know what the extent is of what you're willing to work with us for, is it like 4-block stretch, or is it just a 1-block area that you're looking to do?
Ultimately, we have to go from the railroad tracks up to Columbia, is it Columbia? Yeah, Columbia Street is where we tie in at, so. Now, do we need you to do the whole thing? No, wherever you guys feel like you want
What
new
makes,
alleys in there.
what makes the most sense? Would you see a tiered thing that potentially you could do this over the course of a couple of years for your rebuild, or?
Yeah, we'd like to spread it out over 3 or 4 years. We've got 4 alleys in there that we need to go rebuild, so.
And I know in the past you've mentioned, or there have been issues about where the transformers go.
Yes, anybody that's been down through there, you've seen the big transformers hanging out over the alleys. Not an ideal situation. But in order to do that, we need real estate to put those transformers on.
So do you have solutions for that?
No good ones off the top of my head.
Is that something that you're asking the city to come up with solutions in a process to go from overhead to underground?
I'd like to work with you guys to come up with something. Again, we just need the real estate to do it.
How much real estate do you need?
The transformer pad is 8 feet by 8 feet.
So some places it's easier than others. If you think down near the railroad, moving north from there, that first block, there's adequate room in that alleyway to place a transformer, but none of it is owned by the city. The lots that are available on the east side, I think the parking lots are all owned by F&M Bank. And is there an area that is potentially available on the other side, the developers on the west side, or no?
I think their building goes right up to the alley line.
So it's, for a block like that, the only options that are really available for meeting this would either be on F&M's property, or it would require something to be put underground, like under the sidewalk on the north side, or into the parking area? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, in the parking area. We're trying to avoid putting anything underground. We want to get rid of those big pits that are up and down
Okay.
through there.
So you're talking about putting one out in the parking area
we'd be
using a
taking-
parking stall?
Yes, correct.
When you're
You
saying
need,
parking area, you're saying on-street parking area.
what's that?
When you're saying parking area, you're saying on-street parking area.
Yep. So you're essentially building an island there putting a pad on it. You need, like for that first block, you're looking at needing 1 transformer to service the buildings there?
Yeah, we would combine the 1 transformer to take care of the new development and what's existing.
And then that next block north, are you needing 2 transformer pads located somewhere to make that one happen?
More than likely, yes.
So if you look that second block north, I think there's some space off to maybe on the west, that you could, in the middle of the alley where you could potentially locate 1. I'm going off of memory based off of what's been said by Alliant in the past. but
It's in the block where McConnell Lofts is.
the block where McConnell Lofts is, but at least one would need to go on the south side of McConnell Lofts.
Correct, on Valley and then,
So you're talking about a second
Jefferson.
spot needed to be lost to make that happen.
That sounds really expensive.
That's not a, it's,
wouldn't
that
be a
part isn't a
cost.
cost to the city. Now, what, as Alliance talking about doing this rebuild, from my understanding, if the city is in the process of redeveloping the alley, where we're spending the money to do upgrades on the alley,
On the
as
pavement.
part of that project, they're willing to, whatever the costs are that it takes for them to rebuild their infrastructure, to take on those costs.
correct.
Except for,
When it the problem that they run into is where do you locate the transformers?
Yeah. we
And
wanna
if you
make
can't find a property owner who's willing to have a transformer go on their property, the only alternative is to go north or south from those block faces and to go into the parking area and take
what
up.
are they looking at, going south? Is that what they were looking at last time we talked about that?
I have a quick question. Are there any alleys that we just don't need downtown? I mean, at the end of the day,
No.
how much usage is there? They're pretty rough to begin with. Does it make sense just to eliminate a couple of them that perhaps aren't, that the buildings that are on that block don't require access to it? And then just not repave them and put transformers in that space? I mean, we're trying to build
Theoretically,
an
that's
impervious
possible, but
surface
if you look
anyways,
at,
and
if you look at the usage that occurs on those alleys, the building that's, for instance, the railroad, just north of the railroad tracks, I hate not remembering what the names of different buildings are, but
Law building.
Blau Building, as he goes to redevelop that, or as that group goes to redevelop that, they're looking at some primary access off of there to service the needs of that building off of it. If you go the block, the next two blocks, they have, a lot of the buildings that are on those two block faces have garbage service. They have supplies that come in and out that service primarily off of that alley face. You
Okay.
lose a lot of storage on those two. The last block immediately east of here is the one that has the highest potential for not needing the full alley service off of. But even that one has at least one business that services off of it.
So when we're looking at redoing these alleys, are we eligible for any of the permeable grant monies or anything like that?
Yes.
Any way to lower our costs?
You could go for an IDOLS project in the future, but what you'll find in terms of pure dollar amount, you'll probably at more than double the overall
No,
cost
forget that.
to get 50% of it reimbursed.
Yeah,
It's not,
forget
those projects aren't designed to meet the needs of reducing cost
Okay,
as much as to achieve an additional goal.
okay.
But as you go through these requests, we've got two issues. One, this isn't street funds that can be used to do alleys. You're looking at needing to find another funding source to make the project work, and the transformer locations are really difficult.
It's gonna be a sticking point.
It,
Am I saying we can't go back overhead with those big transformers? Possibly. I mean, nothing's impossible. But we do wanna make sure we get the overhead wires down. That's a sticking point with the property owners down there.
See, I don't have as big as an issue with the overhead wires.
I don't
They've been
either.
working for a long time, you know, they still produce power.
We don't either. It's a lot easier to see when they're bad, but
I don't either.
This
It's a lot of
this
money
is something
for-
that's up for you to make a decision on. I don't have a way to figure out how to pay this one. I've kind of already used up the one pot of dollars where we had some actual dollars that were given to us, and I think I used it 8 times over as we've talked about things at staff meetings. If you want to make this commitment, you certainly can, but it's gonna require, as we go through a budget process, to have something else eliminated as we make that decision.
I think we've got
But you
bigger
do have
priorities.
people who've made these requests.
I know. They've
Okay.
come, and you guys were here when they came. You
Okay,
guys were-
I was sleeping or something. I thought if we were having work done in the alley, then the tab to to resurface it was picked up by Alliant? I'm
This-
not
We're
that-
still
listening
at the
correctly.
resurface.
It's our resurfacing tab. They're paying to do the infrastructure.
Right.
Oh, okay, alrighty. That's where I was
So
sleeping.
let's just, I don't wanna have to milk this. Do we got three that's interested in at least looking at this? Because I'm not.
You also have this conversation going out, and you have some property owners who have pushed on this for several years. They're gonna want to have some ability to have some input on it. And this is a kind of a, you don't have to have a final decision now, but Alliant's gonna have to get some stuff, some work done to be rebuilt through there. And once they rebuild, they're not gonna come back through and do it differently a couple of years later. Would that be a fair statement?
Right, we're trying to avoid reworking something that we just got done doing, so.
I would like a little bit more education. I don't know what the transformer looks like, and I'm interested in what properties this is impacting, what business owners. Before I can make an educated decision. Okay, it's big.
Yeah, this is the alley behind McConnell Lofts, looking towards the railroad
Okay,
tracks.
so that thing on top is the transformer? Okay, it's a
Yes.
big gnarly thing,
Yes,
okay.
they're meant to set on the ground on a concrete pad. But in the early eighties, we had these structures built, many of them are bolted actually to the building, and then legs have been added over the years.
That's
to-
unsightly. If we're
Yeah.
doing downtown redone, we need to think about that. Cosmetically, that's not working for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not
It's,
pretty.
it does though still have a fairly negative impact for McConnell Lofts as they go to do any work
I
on that
agree.
back side. It's not easy for them to do work.
No,
And that's been a major complication for them over the last several years. So you do have to recognize that's an issue. At the same time, you think about putting that transformer down on the ground in the parking area on your block, out on Jefferson Street.
I don't like that idea either.
That's one of the, outside of coming up with another location, which I haven't heard Alliant be able to come up with any. No one's offering spots to be able to get them off the streets. It becomes something that is not the most conducive site.
yeah. Now, the bicycle picture I showed there, that's something that other cities are doing with these transformers that are setting in there.
No, I like that.
In their view, they're painting them fancy,
Yeah.
doing murals on them. We still have to have stickers on them here and there. but-
So, let me ask you this. So, the options are we decorate them, or can they go underground?
We're
Not
trying to
really?
keep them out from
Trying
underground.
to keep them out, okay.
Just maintenance wise, we've got some equipment up on Columbia that you wouldn't think would be wet, but it's had troubles now because it's underwater all the time, and so.
Anyways, do we have three that wanna move forward with
Oh,
this,
what-
with discussion, or, I mean,
So we're talking how much to do these alleys, all that we weren't planning on?
200,000,
$200,000.
maybe a little less.
Depending on who you talk
maybe,
to.
but don't get your hopes up.
But you're doing them as, when you do it over a period of 5 years, you lose some benefit of doing it all at once. That's some cost containment,
And you may see some increases in that price too.
yes. So that's where, as Jesse is gonna ballpark 35, I wanna make sure that you have it covered on the high end,
No doubt,
so.
no doubt.
Did
I just,
did you have the boundary of what alleys you were looking at?
Basically from Front Street to, let's see, where's the fire
Columbia.
station?
Stations over
Fire
here.
station there, yeah. So those alleys there. One,
Which one?
2, 3.
Not the fire station, is it,
Yeah, the alley behind the fire station.
as well?
Yeah. Now there, in that alley, there's no elevated transformers
There's two sections.
until you get up to Quest or CenturyLink. So I don't need, we're not worried about parking spaces in there.
So if we decide not to redo the alleys, what is Alliant's next step?
Ultimately, we're getting in our budgets, to rebuild the area. We'll rebuild it just how it sits, essentially. I mean, we'll make some modifications. Like I said, I'd like to get rid of a lot of these old pits down there with the square lids. You know, we'll do things that'll make sense, but we're not gonna do any major overhauls.
Okay.
I'm not hearing that the council as a whole is ecstatic about the idea of trying to partner in terms of rebuilding the alleyways as part of this process to get it undergrounded, although you may get some input from folks, and there may be a desire from the council to bring this back as a discussion item as we move forward. You're not getting this plan put in place in the next month or two?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I think it's important that we keep the dialogue open.
Exactly.
You know, I would love to, but I see that there's not really a good financial way for us to get it done in this moment. So,
I'm as concerned about where the
That's the o-
transformers go.
right. So I think it's not a no, but it's not a yes kind of thing. I would like to think the majority of us are for, you know, burying these lines. If it didn't, you know, have a cost and if it didn't lose
Yeah,
its
if it
face
didn't have a
or.
cost, I'd be I'm with you, but it does. And, so therefore, I don't wanna play any games with you guys. I'm not for it now, and I'm not gonna be for it after we have people come in and talk. I just think it's gonna be too expensive, and we can't, we don't have money like that right now, so.
No, I
I'm
think
just letting you guys know, I just don't wanna waste your time. That's where I'm at, that's where I'll be.
our problem is we have enough road needs that alleys are not.
That's my concern, is we have too many other infrastructure projects that need to be done as higher priorities.
So,
But thanks for coming down, appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Appointments.
the last discussion item is appointments. Are we good there? Good. Okay. Mr. Tisland, anything before we close out?
Just a reminder, we have Burlington Summer Camp sign up going on now. It's on our website. You can sign up for that at Perkins, for the summer camp at Perkins Park. I think we have maybe over half of the campus filled, so we're right around there. But yeah, if you're interested, please sign up for that. And then the bridge race registration is open as well. That's Saturday, May 18th. Same format as last year. We have the 10K, the 5K, and the bridge walk. Starts at 10 a.m. Down at the Port of Burlington. That can be signed up online or through the Facebook page.
Is there still a competition going on for,
Yeah.
between you and the old man?
Yeah, if any of them can beat me, they,
You're out of order, James, you're out of order.
McDonald's value meal, they get a free lunch.
This guy's out of control, man. Hey, you're out of order, James.
And
Point of order.
I'm hurt this year and haven't been able to run in the last 6 months, so they should be able to, there's a good chance.
That's a lie.
Don't hedge your bets, man.
That's a
That's
lie.
not what this is about.
I saw him running at the Y a couple weeks
Try to
ago.
hedge your bets. Peanut butter.
So I'm thinking May 18th is coming up pretty quick. That's what I'm thinking. I don't have anything other than worried that I won't be ready for that.
You'll be all right. Mr. Billups.
I guess a couple of things. Are we taking any steps for the depot, Nick, in case of flooding? I figure you got your. Okay, and then the other thing is, we'd kind of like to get an update on where we're at on the Mount Pleasant Bridge. Because it looks to me like they're making really pretty good progress. Okay, that's all I have.
The Midwest Magic had their game this weekend. They put a beat down on the police department. It was shameful. They needed our help, but I only had limited amount of time. I think they gave Major Grimshaw a baby chair.
I got pictures, I gotta post them still.
Would you like to say anything about that, Major? You're out of order. You're out of order. Anyways, it was a good game, good turnout. It's always a great event. And I just want to remind people, if you have not had an opportunity to check out a Midwest Magic game, you're really missing out. So you want to try to find time to get part of that. Hightower was there. He shouldn't have been, but anyways, he was. And it was a great event, so.
I think he had a beach towel he was wearing or something, I think. Weren't you wearing a beach towel? Yeah, I got
All I know is
pictures.
they said the city manager was there, dressed like a basketball player, but he knows no basketball, so. I have him arrested for impersonation of a basketball player. Let's keep it moving. Mayor Pro Tem.
I got nothing tonight, thank you.
Counselor.
Nothing.
Assistant City Manager, Nick McGregor. Did you just pose? Did you just pose?
He just posed. was.
On the catwalk. All right, man.
We gotta get him some red carpet and
strut
put it
back,
back
too.
there.
So, flooding, we hit kind of a recent crest at 20.51. We did put up some additional HESCOs in the last week across the north side of the tracks, and then on the east side of the dubbed Hawkeye Hole, we didn't have to cross. We put some clay up to get us by for a little while. Didn't want to have to place all the way across. We do have plans for the depot. You probably saw the same email that I just received. We just got a device in that flood gate. If you'd like to see it, I think we're going to try it out sometime this week.
Smile.
If it works, we should be able to maybe use that around the depot. I think it'd be a little better than what the HESCOs would be. But that was part of the purchase. And actually, I'm glad that we made that purchase when we did, just because Nebraska had the flooding that they had. And I saw pictures from Hamburg, Iowa, and they had a row of HESCOs that went right down the middle of their street. So I don't know if they had those in stock or not, but that definitely impacts the overall inventory. But Mount Pleasant Street Bridge was actually supposed to pour last week. The weather didn't quite, they have to have a temperature just because it's concrete that's lifted in the air, has to have temperatures on both sides. So we put a press release out today. They're actually going to pour tomorrow. They'll do it in 2 pours for the bridge deck, and then after that they'll pour the sidewalk and then the part for the street lights. But the last thing that I have up here for is not necessarily as a function of my job, but I am part of the Greater Burlington Leadership class, and our group project for the year
Don't want to duck.
is to raise money for the Y Camp out at Camp McBride. We're partnering with Case to do some renovations to the facilities out there to hopefully get it so it's something that they can use year round. So as a part of our fundraising activities, we are having a duck race, a rubber duck race across Lake Starker. And so I have raffle tickets. It's a really complex way of having a raffle where I have them for sale for $10. The grand prize is $1,000. So our goal is to sell 3,000 tickets. So you have a definite odds of winning.
See the smile, because he knows he has us.
I know.
He'll trip you into buying.
Why, because we're on Yeah, certainly. Mute that for a minute. Turn that on for a second.
So any free press that we can get on this, you can use whatever photo of me you would like. Don't make that
I'll
deal.
take
Now I'm
a
gonna
couple.
strut
Yeah.
back to
But you would prefer the one where he posed for you. That's the one that he would prefer, so. All right, Nick, we appreciate that. So, yeah, those of you that want to buy some, you can pick up some. He's got a stack from Nick McGregor, and yes, I definitely went in on that.
You got a volume buy on those, Nick?
Volume buy?
Yeah. No? Okay.
Nick, I think everybody likes the flood wall pretty well, except for a beaver who couldn't seem to find his way and was just circling back and forth last night. Felt sorry for him.
James, wrap it up.
I'll sell you for 30 for 300.
That's a deal.
There's something wrong with him, man. I can't figure it out, but there's something wrong with you.
Actually, you can pick up those at the Y as well. So the YMCA is selling them. I don't know where. There's a couple of stores downtown too. I'm not sure where, but the YMCA definitely you can purchase those at. So please take part.
What was the date on the race again, Nick?
May 4th.
May 4th, okay.
I don't have anything else. I wanted to make sure you covered.
Okay.
What?
Quick,
I said hallelujah.
hit it
Sorry.
before you bring
Normally-
something else up.
He's
Normal-
just singing over
Normally
here,
you
that's all.
give us a lot of negative right at the end, and every once in a while it's just nice to end.
This meeting's adjourned. Good night.
Did I say that out loud? I did.